Justamente.
Here. We have here Jesús Schucry Giacoman from Zapata, General Director of Organisms and Regional Mechanisms for the America, from the Foreign Affairs Ministry. We also have Lindiwe Nkuna, Director of Public Works in South Africa, Lindiwe. We also have Mercedes Juan, CONADI's director. We have here Christof Kersting, director of the program Global Alliances for Social Protection. And here we have with us Mary Ann Darauay, director of the National Authority for Development in Philippines, and Blanca Lilia, Director of the International Cooperation of Social Development. Here we have the Subsecretary Javier García Bejos, the Undersecretary of Planning, Evaluation and Regional Development from the Social Development Ministry from Mexico. So you have the microphone. Good afternoon. Estoy aquí para hablar de nombre de Blumenmayer, que es la jefe de GIZ en México, y se empezó a sentir mal recientemente, por lo tanto me pidió que tomara su lugar el día de hoy. Para mí es un placer muy especial y hacerlo porque yo he estado con ustedes durante toda la semana. Mi audiencia y miembros del podium, queridos todos, voy a leer algunos de los puntos que Margarita presentó.
You, or we, have achieved something truly important, cooperating internationally. Especially for me, but also for Marita, we were delighted to see your dedication to leaving no one behind. Discussing issues around social protection and working on future collaborations is essential to learn from each other's successes, but also from failures. We call it lessons learned, to ultimately improve our social protection systems and fight poverty. You have heard a lot about the various improvements that were achieved over the past years, but you have also heard about the various challenges that are still ahead of us. As director of a global program and as German Development Corporation, we are working together with all of you on addressing these challenges in order to promote poverty eradication, especially for the most vulnerable groups of the societies. It is great to see the strong commitment from you, our partners, friends and colleagues, to working towards achieving the goals of the 2030 Agenda. With this agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, we have a great framework for the coming years that explicitly highlights the importance of social protection, as we heard in the SDG 1, and that's very important, it was not stated so much these days, on global partnership. It's the SDG 17. So we are committed also to this SDG. We, as Development Corporation, German Development Corporation, are especially pleased to see the strong interest in the USP 2030 initiative as on universal social protection, as only a universal approach can support income security, combat poverty, and reduce inequalities. With the GIZ program, Global Alliance for Social Protection, which I am fortunate to be able to lead and implement with a great team. You have seen them these days, and I really would thank them for all the work they did in preparation and also in the implementation. With this program, you all will have the chance for deepening your cooperation and improvement on social protection systems with need-based exchange and learning. The transfer of knowledge within your institutions, your ministries, is thereby key for success. Now allow me to switch to Spanish. Yo hablo en nombre de Marita Brömermeyer, directora de la GIZ aquí en México.
Is the head of, and she asked me to say that she's really moved of seeing the huge commitment made by CEDESOL as well as the efforts performed by the whole Mexican government in order to promote this knowledge transfer, and with that the promotion or boosting of the 2030 agenda, not only in Mexico but also in Latin America and around the world. Therefore, at this moment, my special thankful to all the CEDESOL colleagues, as well as mention the different global alliances that made this event possible. And a special appreciation to my friend Javier García Bejos, the Undersecretary, that we saw him working directly with the different beneficiaries during these days. The pictures are still showing all of this, and to the different teams that made this event possible, with very interesting moments, very pleasant and even stressful moments to move such a big group of people, but always full of joy, laughs, good discussions, serious discussions, and with a lot of commitments. Talking about commitments, after the closure of this small act, we will move to undescribed and MOU between the General Cooperation and CEDESOL in order to make continuity and to provide a continuity of the work that we are currently doing for the future. This will be done in the next room, and then we are going to pass it to the other countries as an example of this document. This will be translated into English, so this is just an example how we are willing to continue with the work that we have been done in these global alliances. Let me also thank to Blanca Lili, especially the sub-director here at the table, and the whole team for the work and to make things easier. We did it from July to now with an idea of having all of you together, and we are very sad to see that you're almost leaving. We also would like to thank all the people behind this work, all the people that allow us to have the stay, the catering services, the ones serving lunch, transportation. I also very especially I would like to mention the Professor Hector and his interpreting services that were here young with us. Thank you very much. And also an applause to Mr. Hector and his team. Ahora vamos otra vez al inglés.
Of course, to all of you, the participating countries from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Without your input and knowledge, this event would not have been possible. See you soon in similar in-person or virtual exchange events to deepen our ideas, to address concrete improvements, and to make a visible contribution to the population in need of support through better social protection systems. Please use the established possibilities on socialprotection.org. Yeah, the photos, the documentation, but also the live streaming, the recorded live streaming, so you can see what we have done this week. For us as German Corporation, for me, and for us as a global program, joint exchange and learning is a commitment on which you can all build on. Thank you very much, and have a safe journey home. For some shorter, for some longer. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Christof. Y bueno, no sé, quisiera pedirle a Lindiwe
Now I would like to ask Nkuna, Director for Civil Works in South Africa, she can share some words to close this event.
Thank you and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the Mexican government, the GIZ, for making this opportunity for us to come and participate. This was a very fruitful week for us. We learned a lot out of it. I need to also point out, back at home in South Africa, there was a presidential job summit where the president had convened the social partners, including business, government, and social or civil society, to convene and address or discuss on solutions for how to address unemployment, which normally we know contributes to poverty. So this was a special event for us in that it coincided with what was happening in the past 2 days back at home, that when we now go back, we will be able to share some of the lessons that we got here and link with what was deliberated upon and agreed in the job summit that happened yesterday. I just wanted to also reflect in the National Development Plan back at home, which is a Vision 2030, the EPWP, which is a public employment program, it is positioned to contribute to government's goal of alleviating poverty, developing local communities, providing work opportunities, and enhancing social protection. The NDP further states that the vast majority of the unemployed people currently have no access to social protection, and that the EPWP is seen as a public employment program which can play an important part in reducing this gap, especially now as we are moving into the next phase of the EPWP. So indeed, the EPWP is one of the programs in South Africa which is considered as a vehicle that can be used to respond to the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. So we think the lessons that we learned here will also be able to apply them there. What we take away from these sessions, there are various lessons that we have picked up. The first one is around the issue of the fact that social protection is not a function of one ministry. For it to happen, there is a need for partnerships amongst all the stakeholders in government across all the spheres of government. So that is one lesson that we picked up from all the speakers, that this is an important policy that should be looked at by all the government departments with various functions and mandates to look at this. Another issue that we are taking back home is that social protection is also not a function for government. However, there is a need for partnership with the private sector, civil society, as well as the academic institutions. So each and every one of us in our respective functions, we have a role to play in ensuring that we contribute to this social protection agenda. Another important point that we have picked up during the Wednesday visit to the community kitchens, we did realize and learn something or re-emphasized the fact that government has a role to play in supporting communities. However, communities also need to take ownership in the type of programs that are implemented. One thing that we also picked up, I think the model that we looked at or visited in the community kitchens somehow promotes the concept of social inclusion as well as social cohesion. So there were certain lessons that we learned out of that, whereby we realized that it's not only government that is providing the food for the community members. However, the community members as well realize that they have a contribution to make to ensure that the operations of the community kitchens proceed. So these are some of the things that we are willing to take home to be able to showcase, but in a way also assist some of the similar projects that we have at home to ensure that we learn out of the best practices that came out of this session. Lastly, we have also learned that poverty is multidimensional, so it is important that it is defined clearly what type of poverty are we trying to address. In South Africa, the biggest poverty issue we're addressing is around income poverty. So it is important to be having a clear definition of what type of a poverty are you addressing, so that your measurements are also clear that this is the type of work or the type of indicators that we are looking at. In concluding, we hope that as we now go back to South Africa, in our respective ministries and to all the other colleagues sitting in this room, we will be able to implement all the lessons that we have learned out of here. And I want to believe that for us sitting here, we are the change that the world is waiting for us to happen. So let's go out all there. In the lessons that we have learned in this week, let us make sure that we are bringing the change to the communities that we are responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindiwe. Thank you for your words. It's quite helpful to hear all of this and to learn from each other so we can grow, have greater impacts. Now, I would like to ask Marianne Miriam Darauay, Director of the National Authority for Economic Development in the Philippines, if she can say some words to close this event. Thank you. Mary?
Hola, campeones de desarrollo. Por favor, permítame leer mi mensaje.
Para mis amigos nuevos, a mis amigos de México, muchas gracias por corríjanme si mi gramática está mal y
With a line from a song that starts like this. And now the end is near, and so we face not a final, but a heavy curtain. Heavy, not final, because we are just beginning the task of ensuring that our development goals are achieved, and heavy, because the tasks are many and multifarious, needing resolve and commitment to push forward. But before bringing down the curtain of this most significant forum for our people's rights to be fuertemente envaizado, cómodo or confortable, y vida segura, let us try to recall what we were talking about this past week with regards to social protection. Social protection, especially adoptive social protection, has emerged in response to shocks experienced worldwide. Initially, this was basically reactive, and the development of interventions were largely demand-driven. But as we all became more aware and knowledgeable about the varied shocks, nuts and bolts that impact on development and on the rights of our people, especially the vulnerable, the social protection and adaptive social protection paradigms and working frameworks came to be, and now we can be proactive. Our attention has evolved and expanded to be more responsive to the felt and defined needs of our people. A strong and repeated requisite to have successful prevention, protection, and response, or adaptive social protection, is the strong linkage and partnerships between and among stakeholders and governments, aside from ensuring correct, accurate, and comprehensive information for beneficiary identification and targeting, as well as prioritization, and the need for clear and understandable protocols, systems, and procedures have emerged to be most necessary. All this should be purposefully directed at making our people and communities more adaptive, resilient to the shocks or natural disasters before, during, and after the occurrence of such, in any form. As I said, I repeatedly said, risks have been four kinds, no? Individual, family, economic, governance, and so on. Leaving no one behind is our Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 tagline, goal, and mantra. The journey has begun, and thus there is no need or no point in just going halfway. And JIZ and CEDESOL, including the government of Mexico and our development partners, have exhibited strong and passionate commitment to see to fruition the inclusivity and effectiveness of social protection. Mexico's programs have, I cannot read my own writing, sorry. Mexico's programs have truly changed lives, not only of the Mexicans, but have been great examples for the entire world. I am proud to be going back to my country more equipped with the knowledge and awareness to further strengthen our adaptive social protection initiatives and interventions, especially the community-based participations and programs that we have witnessed here in Mexico. For that, we thank you very much. To my co-participants, or rather, this forum is a clear evidence herefor, and therefore, my deepest expression of thanks in behalf of my own country, and congratulations and sincere wishes for more power and greater success. To my co-participants, let us imbibe and instill in our minds and hearts the social protection mindset and culture. Let us continue our knowledge exchange and together aim to eradicate extreme poverty, locally and especially globally. Let us leave no one behind. To my co-participants, feliz viaje, mi compañeros de clase. Gracias de nuevo, felicidades y que Dios los bendiga a todos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for your words. I think many of us are also better equipped for the challenge to follow. I think the challenge of the objective of the week has already been met. Now I would like to ask Jesús Giacoman Zapata, Director of the Regional Mechanisms and Development from the Foreign Affairs Office, if he can give us his closing words. Good afternoon, you all. Welcome all of you. It was a pleasure having you here in the Foreign Affairs Ministry. The Undersecretary Javier García Bejos, Dr. Mercedes Juan, Director General of the National Board for the Inclusion of People with Disabilities, Mr. Christof Kersting, Director of the Global Alliances Program from the German Agency for Cooperation, Mrs. Lindiwe, Director of the Civil Work Department of South Africa, and Mrs. Mary Ann, Director of the National Authority for the Development Area in the Philippines. Thank you very much for being here with us, for doing this trip. Obviously, from the Foreign Affairs, I'm not going to talk about the social development, but how do we see all the different works that were performed during this week and not leaving anybody behind? For us, it's extremely important to carry out this. So, Christof mentioned on his speech, he has seen that he has worked, the Undersecretary working, and I have seen him for many years, and I really appreciate the support in this international fora. Without the leadership of the Social Development Ministry, won't be possible. We know that during this week we collect a lot of experts and specialists and ministries from the experts in the social protection from Africa, Asia, Latin America, through the Global Alliances Program for the Protection that has the support of the German Cooperation Agency, and we're really thankful. But what is related to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, why is so important for us to come here, discuss, and reach some agreements? Well, I'm going to give you a summary of a brief summary from 2016 up to today, without talking into a detail or a specific detail for this type of events. In the framework of this OAS, we have the meeting of the high authorities of social development. During that opportunity, the ministries for social development in the Americas committed to meet a working plan for the long term that they call the commitments for the social development in the Americas. From there, I was pleased to meet the Undersecretary, and we invite him to have the chair position of the Inter-American Commission for Social Development. On all the CEDESOL works have been adding up all the different deliveries, strategies, all that the social development ministries will discuss the next November in Guatemala, and that is why that during the opening, I was very happy to have the Social Development Ministry from Guatemala in order to continue this important achievement. We've been working with the ECLAC. Mexico was the chair, and we delivered the chair position to Cuba last May, and it was a health, and we celebrate the different regional commitments for social development. We had people from the Inter-American Bank, and the people from the FAO, from the UNDP, and from other organizations, and all the resources will help us to have you here and to share these experiences. I would like also to tell you that we have taken all the notes, so in the different international fora that we can see that this is the social development, and the conclusions that have been expressed have certain data and can reach to the political agendas. At the end of the day, we can see that the conclusions can be turned into state policies all these policies could have an impact in the short and long run. There's no doubt that with all these multilateral efforts that we have made, and with the different development policies that you are expressing, are the ones that will be taken forward. Next month, I was saying that we will have the ministerial meeting in Guatemala. Previous to that, with Chela, we will have a discussion in terms of disasters, where one of the main topics to be addressed will be the one that you mentioned, how natural disasters are impacting the development of our countries. So previously in Washington, before the United Nations Week, we had in the OAS meeting, and we addressed the topic. So what we are doing in Foreign Affairs office is to take the advantage of your experience, of your conclusions, so we can enrich the different political fora that we have. there's no more else to say, just to thank for your visit, and to have the presence here in the Foreign Affairs Office for us is quite important. Undersecretary, thank you very much for the support given. Doctor, I cannot stop saying that with you we have already promoted many of these topics when you were the health secretary in the WHO. Thank you very much for the work that you've done. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thanks very much, Jesus. Thanks for the warm hospitality from the Foreign Relations Ministry for leaving this space. And this was an opportunity to exchange, to learn, and regarding all the challenges we have regarding social protection. Thanks on behalf of all the participants and all of us who were here cooperating in this workshop. Now I'd like to ask the Assistant Minister, Mr. García, Bejos, to give us his final comments, his final words and statement. Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure, certainly, to come to the conclusion of these highly intensive days of work that we began. When about 2 or 3 months back, we did the planning. We planned this event. We knew that there were going to be truly complicated days, and truly and sincerely, on behalf of the government of Mexico, I want to express the gratefulness to the German Cooperation Agency for motivating these meetings and for generating these very significant and profound spaces that give rise to the generation of agendas which are becoming more relevant locally and also globally. Whenever we discuss, whenever we hold conversations and participate in these forums, we participate and we know that we're on the right path. So first of all, I want to express to you a very fraternal greetings from the President of the Republic, Mr. Enrique Peña Nieto, who has followed closely and with interest all the work that has been done during this week, and has asked me to express to you his gratefulness. Because in Mexico, we all know that the relevance of these forums concerning international cooperation, all this is about to build a world with more and better opportunities. And the President of the Republic has committed himself to this task during his administration. And during this last leg of his term, he says that we can all feel proud because we know that Mexico is globally capable. We want to be present, we want to work, and we want to help in the building up of these agendas which are essential, so that as far as social protection and in the fight against poverty, we can make progress, and our progress will be more speedy. I want to thank my friends, and I want Mr. Jesús Giacoman Zapata to express his gratefulness to our Chancellor, Mr. Luis Videgaray, for all the ways in which he cooperated by providing these wonderful facilities in the Foreign Relations Ministry. I want to thank Mr. Christof and all the people from the German Cooperation Agency, and please tell Marita that Mexico will continue to work in this permanent task, undoubtedly. Yesterday somebody was telling me, if we had organized this event because it had already been scheduled, or about how was it that 60 days before this administration came to an end, could we have the willingness to issue this summons and sit down to work? And I said that there's one main and essential reason. We as officials, we come and go, but institutions remain. And it is institutions that cause countries to grow. That is why I am sure that Mexico from now on will find and continue to find its participation in all these forums, and together with all these international agencies, the spaces and the possibilities to continue building. Together with Christof, I want to thank deeply all the countries present during this week. Of course, Germany, Mexico, Indonesia, the Philippines, Malawi, South Africa, Peru, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, Guatemala, Ethiopia, India. To all of you, our gratefulness for coming here and being part of this worker group, which I believe is essential to continue building an agenda such as the one we all aspire to have. It is not only the framework of the 2030 agenda. Each country's agenda holds varied complexities, and this is something that we've seen this week. The important thing is how we converse among themselves so that these national agendas may find meeting points. And these points of encounter are the ones that give validity to all this work, and this fills us with pride here in Mexico. I want to thank CEPAL, as well as the ILO, the United Nations Development Program, and my friends from the World Bank. I want to thank them for their presence and their permanent support, especially with Mexico, William Concha, everyone, Pablo, Clemente. I wouldn't like to, not to mention any one of you. The Inter-American Development Bank and all my friends, my peers from the federal government, specifically Blanca, and all my work team in the assistant ministry, all the advisors who closely followed and participated with great enthusiasm. Thanks for the fine response that we've had from you during this work week. And I would simply want to make a final afterthought. 5 points that I thought about after all this that we have been discussing during these few days. I'm not trying to make a summary because I think that we've, at all times, we have understood as each day has gone along. But there are some ideas which I think are relevant, and I think they are essential. The first of these is that we have to strengthen the institutionality of the fight against poverty. We have to care for the institutions which are fighting against poverty, from the ministries, autonomous agencies, that universities should be more actively involved in the agencies. We have to strengthen our institutions. This is an essential condition in order to remove social policy from the temptations of politics. And if we do so, the fight against poverty will become, in all senses, the fight that will be simplified. Because if we remove the political agenda from this, and if we only leave the public policy agenda, because we not only have a moral and ethical duty, it is a matter of justice to attack in depth and from the very roots of poverty, marginalization, and we will only be able to do this if we have stronger institutions. And these institutions must be encouraged in each one of our countries, starting from universal frameworks. When we study economic policies and we look at the results of the world economy during the last few years, especially in Latin America, we were living in the midst of recurring crises because we had not become aware of how important it was to generate long-term public policies regarding the economy of our country. The agreement was clear. we shouldn't have high inflation. You couldn't become indebted. We generate a set of rules that we knew that if we didn't comply with them, we would have crisis. These same rules should be taken to social policies. We need to find this agenda and this set of institutions that will help us to strengthen the long-term vision of this fight against poverty. And this leads me to my second thought. And we must acknowledge the multiple dimensions and the various sources of the problems underlying poverty, and how we can change our policies so that not only the governments will be responsible and the exclusive monopoly for fighting this problem. There must be a sum of wills from the companies, from the labor unions, universities, from the public at large. Everybody involved in each country's economy should be participating aligned to one single objective. That is why redefining how we're going to fight against poverty during the next few years will be something essential. But it will be more so if we strengthen institutions and if we find the variables that may better help us fight against poverty. And if we generate joint responsibility at all levels of government and all those involved within society, surely the results will come to us much faster. Thirdly, and this is on account of what I was just saying, and it is that throughout this week, all of us have spoken about what we're doing in our countries. But there was an assumption floating in the air. We cannot have a fight against poverty if there is no stability and economic growth, if we don't care for essential variables in economy, if we don't generate conditions for investment, for the generation of formal employment, which on a long-term basis is the only thing that will allow us to overcome poverty, then we would commit a very serious mistake. And we must remind ourselves every day that the tax paid by the poor is inflation. And we have to remember every day that there is no situation that is more hurting and that causing more inequality than the non-existence of an effective inclusion for employment. There's nothing that can hurt an economy more than informality. So in spite of all these discussions that we've had during the last few days, the good news is that nobody discussed about the macroeconomic environment in our countries, because it would seem that all over we're doing the task right. It would be worthwhile that this permanent task should be a condition and a permanent assumption in order to overcome this issue of poverty. We must say that a fourth thought that comes on account of the field visit that we made last Wednesday. We must strengthen and empower communities. The sense of community, the awareness of being in a community, not only individual, but beneficiaries and citizens. We have to strengthen and empower communities that will manage to work in a more solidary fashion in favor of the very place where they are living. If we provide tools in order for this condition and this generosity and this solidarity to exist, we may say that important things are happening that will transform the reality of people. A moment ago, somebody in the previous panel, asked a question and said, "Why, if there's so much good news in fighting extreme poverty, why is there so much frustration?" Well, because the perception is that there's still a lot of poverty, and this perception will not change if we don't change the way of doing politics. We shouldn't go going from up down. We should start from the local level and from the community level. The individual is essential. And it's the individual that understands his or her role within his or her community. I think that the example given by the community kitchens, when we think about 1.2 meals served daily with the voluntary and community work of over 70,000 people, we ask, well, what kind of incentives do they have? You saw the incentive there, and we discover it whenever we go to these kitchens. We recover the sense of community. People recover an important part of what the existence of macro cities has taken away from us, the sense of belonging locally. And there, I believe that we have a very important idea regarding the characteristics of public policies that we must build in the near future, in the years to come. Finally, it must be said that multilateral cooperation and these forums are the best way to tell people in our country, tell the people in our countries that we're on the right path. We're moving ahead on the right path. If we don't work together, if we don't work hand in hand with agencies, if we don't compare what we're doing in other countries, if we don't learn from each other, and if we don't generate a common language and a social conversation which is much more powerful in order to explain to people what we're doing and how we're spending the people's money in order to eradicate poverty, then we will commit an error in principle. Because when we apply and when we need more budget, more money, and more programs, because the 2030 agenda is going to pressure us, then those our taxpayers will ask from us, will ask, are you really giving results? Because otherwise, you cannot continue to charge taxes if your country continues to be a factory of poor people. So we must generate these points of reference that will be common to all of us, so as to generate this information and this social conversation, these social communications that will make out of public and social policies and the social protection systems a priority in an agenda where we may discuss, we may converse, and we may listen, and we be certain that what we're doing is truly making progress along the right path without leaving, and that we shall leave no one behind. And once having said this, I want to say, on behalf of all my friends in Sedisol, that the great hope that the world has when we talk about fighting poverty and social protection systems is to regenerate in the public agenda what is said regarding poverty. We have to think again about poverty, but looking at the face, considering the faces of people, not just figures. We're talking about people, not numbers. Poverty generates suffering. It generates separateness. It generates the worst forms that break, that tear apart the social fabric of our communities. That's why we must summon, and we make a summons, and so that whenever we discuss poverty, we should do it on behalf of everyone, for the good of everyone, always, in every place and in every community. And if we do it so, surely we will be moving along with and leaving no one behind. Finally, I want to thank everyone, all those who participated during these few days, those who shared their ideas with us, those who contributed to these discussions, and those of us who worked very gladly, so that little by little we may return to this dialogue regarding social protection, the dynamism, and the place that it deserves. And as I said, in all the languages, danke, yanjavat, terima kasih, sikomo, obrigado, salamat, thank you, and muchas gracias, thanks for having been with us. And if I am allowed, please stand. I would ask you to please stand. And almost at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, October 5th, 2018, I declare on behalf of the CEDESOL and the government of Mexico, I bring to a close our work on social protection in extreme poverty, as well as the International Week on Social Protection. I hope that this work has been for the good of all our countries and for the good of all the people that most need it. Thanks very much, and I bid you farewell. Thanks, Javier. Everybody is invited to the lighting. Well, okay. Some are invited.